It was the bloodiest conflict ever fought on American soil, brother against brother, state against state, and a nation divided. The American Civil War wasn't just about politics or geography. It was a battle over the soul of the United States. What kind of country would America become? One built on freedom for all, or one that continued to profit from human bondage? In this video, we'll uncover the causes, the key events, and the people who shaped the war that changed the nation forever. The American Civil War, from 1861 to 1865, pitted the United States against 11 southern states. These states chose to secede and form the Confederate States of America. This 4-year struggle remains the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history. Its roots lay in decades of growing friction between the North and South. This sectional divide wasn't just political, it was deeply economic and social. The issue of slavery was central to this growing chasm. Between 1815 and 1861, the northern states experienced rapid modernization. Their economy was diversifying beyond agriculture. While farming remained important, industrialization was taking hold. Northern investment poured into factories, railroads, and canals. They built extensive transportation networks. Financial industries like banking also flourished. Communication systems expanded rapidly in the North. Inexpensive newspapers and magazines were widely available. The telegraph further connected the region. In stark contrast, the Southern economy remained largely agrarian. It was based on large plantations producing cash crops like cotton. This system relied heavily on enslaved labor. Southerners invested their wealth primarily in slaves, often more than in land. By 1860, the vast majority of manufacturing capital was in the free states. This economic divergence created fundamentally different societies. Despite the lack of industrial investment, the Southern economy seemed robust to many Southerners in 1860. The price of cotton, their main export, had soared in the 1850s. The value of enslaved people, considered property, rose accordingly. By 1860, Southern whites had twice the per capita wealth of Northerners. 3/5 of the nation's wealthiest individuals resided in the South. This prosperity was inextricably linked to the institution of slavery. The question of extending slavery into new territories was a contentious issue from the nation's early days. The Northwest Ordinance of 1784 had already addressed it. However, the issue exploded with the request for Missouri statehood in 1818. Congress debated for 2 years before reaching the Missouri Compromise of 1820. This agreement allowed Missouri in as a slave state, but balanced it with Maine as a free state. It also prohibited slavery north of the 36-day 30 parallel in the Louisiana Purchase territory. This was just the first in a series of political compromises. These deals attempted to manage the conflict between pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces. The expansion of slavery into the West became a defining political battleground. The end of the Mexican-American War in 1848 added immense new territory to the United States. Roughly 500,000 square miles were acquired. This acquisition brought renewed urgency to the slavery debate. Would these new lands be free or slave? The question fueled intense political maneuvering. The Compromise of 1850 attempted to settle the issue, including admitting California as a free state and enacting a stricter Fugitive Slave Act. However, these compromises only delayed the inevitable clash. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 introduced the concept of popular sovereignty. This allowed residents of territories to decide on slavery, effectively repealing the Missouri Compromise line. Popular sovereignty led to violence in Kansas. Pro-slavery and anti-slavery settlers rushed into the territory, resulting in bloodshed. This period became known as Bleeding Kansas. The Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision in 1857 further inflamed tensions. The court ruled that enslaved or formerly enslaved people were not citizens. It also declared that Congress could not prohibit slavery in territories invalidating the core principle of the Missouri Compromise. This decision was a major victory for the South, but outraged many Northerners. It seemed to open all territories to slavery. It further solidified the belief among abolitionists that the institution was a national problem requiring federal action. Throughout the 1850s, the gap between North and South widened. More Northerners, driven by moral opposition or a desire to protect free labor, believed slavery should be contained or abolished. Abolitionist movements gained prominence. White Southerners, conversely, feared that limiting slavery's expansion would doom their economic and social system. They saw it as an attack on their property rights and way of life. States' rights arguments became increasingly intertwined with the defense of slavery. Politicians found it increasingly difficult to bridge the divide through compromise. The political landscape fractured. New parties emerged, like the explicitly anti-slavery Republican Party. The 1860 presidential election became a turning point. The Democratic Party split along sectional lines. The Republican candidate, Abraham Lincoln, ran on a platform opposing the expansion of slavery into new territories. Lincoln won the election without carrying a single Southern state. His victory signaled to many in the South that their political power was diminishing. They saw it as a direct threat to their institution of slavery. 7 Southern states had previously threatened secession if a Republican won. Following Lincoln's election, they carried out this threat. South Carolina was the first to secede in December 1860. Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas soon followed. By February 1861, these states had organized themselves. They formed the Confederate States of America, electing Jefferson Davis as their president. With secession underway, tensions mounted over federal property in the South. Fort Sumter, a Union fort in Charleston, South Carolina, became a focal point. It was one of the few remaining federal strongholds in seceded territory. Confederate forces surrounded the fort. President Lincoln attempted to resupply the garrison. This move was seen as an act of aggression by the Confederacy. In the early morning hours of April 12, 1861, Confederate batteries opened fire on Fort Sumter. This act marked the beginning of armed hostilities. It was the first engagement of the Civil War. The bombardment lasted 34 hours. Remarkably, this initial clash resulted in no fatalities on either side. Union Major Robert Anderson surrendered the fort to Confederate General P.G.T. Beauregard. The attack on Fort Sumter galvanized both sides. In the North, it was seen as an act of rebellion requiring a military response. In the South, it was viewed as a defense against invasion. Within weeks of Fort Sumter, 4 more Southern states seceded. Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina joined the Confederacy. The lines were drawn, and the nation was irrevocably split. President Lincoln responded by calling for 75,000 militiamen to serve for 3 months. He proclaimed a naval blockade of the Confederate States. He maintained that the Southern states were not a separate country, but states in rebellion. Lincoln also took extraordinary measures to preserve the Union. He directed funds for raising troops and suspended the writ of habeas corpus in certain areas. The Confederacy, in turn, authorized calls for hundreds of thousands of soldiers. The American Civil War was not a simple conflict. It was a complex struggle rooted in fundamental disagreements over economics, society, and human rights, with slavery at its core. Understanding its origins is crucial to understanding American history. If you found this deep dive informative, hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more historical explorations and educational content. Let us know in the comments what aspect of the Civil War you'd like us to cover next.